A case that's drawing national attention is now in the hands of the Wisconsin Supreme Court. Today, state justices heard arguments on whether or not to scrap the current legislative voting map. Now, the debate is one that divides Republicans and Democrats. Liberals saying the legislative assembly maps are unfair and favor Republicans. The argument is narrower than that, though. The side that wants the map changed argues the current one is unconstitutional because not all districts are contiguous, and many have what are called voting islands. They're areas that aren't connected to the rest of the district. Attorneys who want the map changed say it's important to keep districts in one piece.
You are connecting like communities with each other, neighborhoods with neighborhoods that surround them. And that goes to important representational interests. And so this limits the legislature's power to engage in distortions of representational government.
So the other side, arguing to leave the maps as they are, say the contingency argument has no merit, and the decision to file the lawsuit one day after the court flipped to liberal is purely a political stunt.
Nor is there anything to cry foul about, for their delay in the governor's about face reveals something about the nature of their claims. They are meritless. They are a wolf in sheep's clothing designed to backdoor a political statewide remedy.
So now that arguments have concluded, the case is in the hands of the justices. A decision is expected in December or January. Coming up tonight at 6, the other group that gathered at the Capitol, their message coming up.
And multiple state lawmakers commenting on the case today. Senate Majority Leader Devin LeMahieu and Speaker Robin Vos releasing a shared statement saying, quote, rushing to upend the 2024 elections and cancel the terms of the 17 duly elected senators will prove this case to be the campaign promise that Justice Protasiewicz professed it wasn't. Wisconsin Senator Melissa Agard also releasing a statement on the legislative map saying, quote, it is shameful that for more than a decade, politicians in Wisconsin have chosen their voters rather than voters choosing their representatives.